of attention being paid this afternoon to the timeline of the rainfall and the flooding and whether the warnings issued on Thursday night and Friday were actually adequate. A wall of water surged down the Guadalupe River in the overnight hours, limiting the number of people who could get those warnings. The National Weather Service began forecasting the threat of flooding in Kerr County as early as Thursday morning, July 3rd, with a hazardous flood outlook. At 1:18 p.m. Central Time on Thursday, a flood watch was issued, highlighting Kerrville, among other locations, as being at risk of flash flooding. But local officials have pointed out those forecasts were for a lot less rain than the amount that actually ended up falling. There were several technical forecasts throughout Thursday afternoon and evening with increasingly heightened language about the magnitude of the potential flooding. At 6:30 p.m. Central Time on Thursday, river forecasters were calling for locally intense rain rates that would, quote, quickly overwhelm the ground's ability to absorb the water. Now we move ahead to Friday morning, 1:14 a.m. Central Time on Friday morning. The first warning for life-threatening flash floods for parts of Kerr County, including Camp Mystic and points west of Kerrville, those came and they were marked specifically to trigger the emergency alert system. But that would have sounded the alarm on cell phones in the warned area, assuming that those cell phones had service and their users had not turned off the alerts. And we know that cell service in that area is spotty on some occasions. At 4:03 a.m. Central Time on Friday, a flash flood emergency warning was issued for Kerr County. At 4:35 a.m. Central Time, the Kerr County Sheriff's Office sent the first report of flooding at low water crossings. Here was the crucial moment in time here. At 5 o'clock a.m. Central Time on Friday, the Guadalupe River burst from its banks, sweeping homes, cars, cabins, and people downstream. At 5:34 a.m. Central Time, a flash flood emergency warning was issued for Kerrville. Senator Ted Cruz, a Republican from Texas, he spoke at a news conference a short time ago, and he talked about the timeline of these warnings.
We know the National Weather Service put out an emergency warning just after 1 a.m. and a second emergency warning just after 4 a.m. Now, obviously, most people at 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. are asleep. And so I think we will have a reasonable conversation about, A, are there any ways to have earlier detection? And some of that, the limits of a flash flood, they're very difficult because they can arise so quickly.
Reporting this is by our colleagues Andrew Friedman, Emma Tucker, and Mary Gilbert. There are two offices of the National Weather Service in Texas that are closely involved in forecasting and warning about flooding on the Guadalupe River. Those are the Austin San Antonio office of the National Weather Service and that agency's office in San Angelo, Texas. Now, they are missing some key staff members, but they did still issue several watches and warnings about the flood danger that we just went over in that timeline. Now, Tom Fahey, he is the legislative